So we just got some news from Ubisoft that is actually a pretty big deal. They are completely changing their editorial philosophy when it comes to deciding what games get made, why they're made, how they design them. Everything is changing. And it's kind of a big deal that nobody's talking about. So I wanted to talk about it. And I got the man, the myth, the legend, Joy Raptor, to join me to discuss it in this sort of casual, laid back, conversational video. So hopefully you enjoy this. Send some love to Joy Raptor. Links in the description box below. And of course, you can just search Joy Raptor and find him. He's a good friend of the channel, does amazing content on Ubisoft. Can't recommend him enough. Enjoy the video. And there we are. Hey, how you doing?
Hey,
cool.
Thanks for inviting me. That's very cool.
Yeah, I've wanted to do this for a long time. We I mean, we share a lot of the same audience. We all talk about Assassin's Creed, about Far Cry, like anything Ubisoft, your name comes up. So I figured, like, why not get the man, the myth, the legend, and let's talk about this very interesting news live. Like, why not? There's no other way to
let's
do it.
it.
So let me.
Where do you want to start? Because there's a lot to unpack. It's it's an interesting news time for like a Ubisoft fan.
It is, and I've said this before. I have like such a roller coaster ride of emotion and relationship with everything at Ubisoft, because like 1 week I'm like, okay, that's really interesting. I'm interested. They said they're going to do this and that. That's really interesting and compelling. And then the next week I'm like, oh, like they're trying to implement Ubisoft Quartz, but then they're also not, and they're walking away from it. Like, okay, my brain hurts. Yeah, I have such a roller coaster ride relationship with it. But this news, you're right, is very, very interesting. So for everybody at home, basically what this comes out to is that Ubisoft announced recently that they're kind of changing their design philosophy a wee bit from what it's been in the past. And this specifically came from a guy named Fawzi Mesmar. Is that? Do you know if I'm pronouncing that right? I have no idea.
I'm also really bad with pronunciation, but I think you're nailing it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with it. We'll roll with it. But he's the vice president of editorial. So basically, this is one of the guys at the very top of Ubisoft that gives the thumbs up or the thumbs down on whether those are both thumbs up or thumbs down on whether or not something is greenlit for a big project, whether they get the big budgets. He's basically the decision maker at the top.
And he only like joined Ubisoft for not even a year yet. So that's I think also why we're seeing these big changes, because it just like is having the wheel spinning, like making big decisions.
Yeah, this guy, we actually pulled him up on LinkedIn. He has a notable history in the industry. I had never heard of this guy before. I'm sorry, Fawzi, if that, I'm sorry. I hadn't heard of you before. But this guy's been all over the place. He's worked as a game design lecturer. Previously, he worked as a consultant. So basically, companies would bring him in to help them develop projects because he's so expensive they can't keep him on staff. He's worked at DICE. He worked at King. I mean, out of all of these, what was the most interesting to you in terms of his history of design work? What stood out to you?
Yeah, I think DICE, because like you said, King, also like Gameloft, like they're both like mobile game companies. I do think that having a mobile background is really important these days, because a lot of big franchises are going mobile. So having that experience is very, very, I think good. But I would say DICE, because that's I think the closest to the sort of console games that Ubisoft usually makes. And I'm like of two minds, because I see like a Battlefield 5, I see Star Wars Battlefront 2, and I see 2042 Battlefield, which were kind of the weaker DICE games.
Yeah.
Like if you talk to Battlefield fans, mostly like, oh, Battlefield 1 was amazing, Battlefield 4, and it kind of went downhill with Battlefield 5, and that's kind of where he came in. But
that's right, when he came in. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know what? Maybe he just came in at a bad time. Who knows? But
it was a hard time for DICE for sure. And of course, like Battlefront 2 was actually a pretty great game. It turned out to be a great game, but I'm not sure if he had like control over the whole loot box controversy.
It's always really hard to tell like who was the decision maker for stuff like that. And they do it by design, very intentionally. They bury the responsibility for decisions like that, so you don't know who to be mad at. And you're just like, yeah, well, it's the other guy, who cares? But like the reason that this is significant is because he came into Ubisoft, like we said, he popped in November of 21. So he's been there 11 months. He has not been there very long, but in the time that he's been there, he's worked on Mario Rabbids Sparks of Hope, and now he's speaking about overarching design decisions within Ubisoft that affect all of their franchises. Because bear in mind, this guy doesn't just work on one very little thing. He's working on the overarching editorial. He's the vice president of it. So when we look at it, what he said specifically was that, quote, we want to be okay with making a decision around one game and go, we're going to go for that and we're going to commit. We're going to be okay with that it can make those kinds of people happy, but maybe not everybody happy. And that's okay. We believe that a more focused game is better for the people that like that kind of game. Which at the outset, like, okay, what does that even mean? But the implication of this is actually pretty broad and overarching, because this is not the way that Ubisoft has worked, at least in my opinion, over the last
for sure.
Certainly few years.
Yeah, and I think like also the example when I talked about this article on my channel was Valhalla, which was the game that was trying to appeal to both the old school fans and the RPG fans, and in the end it was a master of none. Like it did not do the social stealth well, or stealth was also kind of broken. Sure, it had Basim and some sort of like you got the hidden blade again, while in Odyssey, of course, we did not have it. And yeah, it was still an RPG, while it did not go as deep as Odyssey, so those people were not happy either. And that's why maybe I'm jumping a little too ahead already, but like with Mirage, they're really saying, okay, this for the old school fans, but don't worry, if you like the RPGs, Codename Red is coming as well. And if they apply that to other Ubisoft games, I think, for example, a Ghost Recon Frontline, what was the target audience for that? Like that was of course the Battle Royale Ghost Recon game that they also ended up canceling. I would not be surprised if he had to do with that, if he came in and is like, okay, we're seeing a lot of dislikes on, like, there is no target audience for this. And Breakpoint is another example. Like they had raids in a Ghost Recon game. Like they wanted to appeal to the Destiny and Division fans, while also still having the stealth and the slower gameplay that you expect in a Ghost Recon. So it was just all over the place. No one was happy. And I think with this approach, they're trying to at least make sure that the audience that they make the game for are happy, and then everyone else who might be like looking in and might be like, oh, this is maybe interesting, might have a good time as well, but at least the core audience has a good time. And I think if you at least have them happy, maybe there's better word of mouth, and you can get other people interested as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it reminds me actually of something that our Lord and Savior Todd Howard with Bethesda Game Studios said, where he was talking in a design interview thing. I think it was with regards to Fallout 3, I believe. But he spoke about game development overarching, and he said that what he tells his design teams is, we can do anything. We just can't do everything. And it's a simple little catchy phrase, but that is a very important thing to remember, because you can do a stealth-focused Assassin's Creed game, or you can do like an action RPG with something like The Division, or any of these other things, or a really quirky combat system like For Honor. But when you try to do like For Honor with like, you know, a season pass and a battle royale version to it, then we slap in maybe like Jenga, and then we like, let's just throw everything in there, it'll be great, everybody will love it. It's like, that's not actually how that works. And one of the reasons that I felt relatively optimistic with regards to Ubisoft over the last maybe 6 months or so was that I've seen that they are trying to figure out how to make players happy, which again, you'd think that would be a given, but the reason that that's important is because with like Assassin's Creed Infinity, for example, they're not creating a game that they sell you once and then they walk away. They're trying to build something that you will play for years, that you'll keep going back to. And if you're getting burnt out on it like Valhalla after like half of the game's runtime, that doesn't work for a game that's supposed to be living and breathing. They've got to figure out what appeals to people and then make sure they have something that makes them happy. And then these people have something different that they like and make them happy. And I think what they probably realized with Valhalla is, just like you said, you can be the jack of all trades, but you'll be the master of none. And like we
Yeah.
saw with Saints Row, when you try to do everything, you end up doing everything really kind of mediocrely and
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
poorly.
I would argue that Odyssey is kind of already the game that they are maybe trying to make because, of course, it was such a like it of course had a lot from Origins, but it really went hard on the RPG side, like the dialogue choices,
Mhm.
like the RPG, like getting loot, the builds. Like you really had to. Some enemies were like, yeah, not bullet spongy, but like they had a ton of health.
Mhm.
So that game already was, I think, what Codename Red will be as well. Like really focused on that audience. Only at that point, there were still Assassin's Creed fans like looking for a new Assassin's Creed game, being like, "This is not for me. Why is this called Assassin's Creed?" And now they can say, "Hey, this is still Assassin's Creed, but there is something for you as well." And I hope that that is kind of yeah what makes hopefully everyone happy because that's kind of where like I'm more a fan of the RPGs, but every time there's like a mythical expansion or someone sees like a unique camel or like a weird mythical or crazy thing, everyone's like, this is not Assassin's Creed anymore.
Mhm.
And that was mostly because those people just did not have something for them. It really felt that, oh, my franchise is slipping away. It's going to this side. So I really hope that they can, appease everyone. It will be a hard task though, but
Yeah, yeah, and it always is. And I mean, the immediate thing that this makes me and that made everybody else think of was, of course, Assassin's Creed Mirage, which you kind of touched on briefly. Which, I mean, basically, Mirage seems to be the perfect example of a game where they are trying to make a smaller group, those who like the return to basics and the roots, those people happy, but those who are super into like the crazy big open world expansive world of Valhalla and Odyssey, they're probably going to look at like Mirage and be like, that, like, I don't want that, I want the other thing. So
yeah.
when asked if this is what he was touching on, he said that absolutely that's what they were doing. He said, quote, "So for the people who want to go back to the roots, we're making a game for them with Mirage, and hopefully for others that didn't get to enjoy that classic when it came out. We're also making a multiplayer experience, a mobile experience, a big RPG experience. There's so many different types of elements that we cater for, and also exemplifies the editorial vision that we set, in which we're not making the one game for everybody, but we're making a game for you and focused, and we're committing to the decisions that we're making on it." And I think that this
Yeah.
is just
Sounds great.
I'm in. Like, my biggest problem with Valhalla, with these other games, is that they kind of lose focus. Even something like Far Cry 6, started feeling like they were trying to do like looter shooter mixed with RPG, mixed with heavy crafting, mixed with like they're trying to do all this, and they also wanted to do just tonally. They wanted to do kind of lighthearted and silly. But then they have Giancarlo Esposito coming in with amazing performances, like as El Presidente, which just leads to this whiplash of not really knowing what the hell you're supposed to feel.
Yeah. And for me, Far Cry was also like really, it had like a sort of identity crisis in terms of what type of players do we want to like appease. Because I also did a poll, like most people are playing Far Cry single player. But they really had this incentive for people to play co-op by giving you extra currency that you could only get by completing missions in co-op. And all the post-launch, like all these expeditions or I can't remember the name anymore, but where you would like go into a mission, had to like carry a bomb back to the entrance. It was like really co-op focused. So that was also once again where it was like everyone likes the story and wants more content with Danny, but all you're giving us is this multiplayer stuff that no one can really finish alone, especially on higher difficulties. And that's what's also really interesting about the article, saying that Codename Red and Hexay are single player only, and the biggest investments that Ubisoft in the company are making towards single player, which is kind of crazy for a company to say in 2022. I really think we're turning a corner where a lot of people are like, no, Battle Royale, I mean, sure, we want one of those as well, but not everything has to be a live service multiplayer game. Live service single player can work as well. And I think that's very interesting. And they're making a separate multiplayer experience too. And not sure if you already want to touch on that, because I'm curious, what is the future for Far Cry then? Because what Ubisoft said is that in the next 5 years, they want the trio of their sort of biggest brands, so Tom Clancy, Assassin's Creed, and Far Cry, to rank in $2 billion revenues
Hmm.
annually within the next 5 years. So they're laying the groundwork right now, and then in 5 years' time, they should have the ball rolling where every year they're making $2 billion, which is not even like they're not even making that yearly right now. So
Hmm.
they're really like banking hard on that sort of stuff. So I'm curious where Far Cry goes, because do they see that most people play that single player, or are they still thinking that people want to just go make chaos with a friend in co-op in this open world?
Hmm. I think it's a great question, and I like the thing I always try to remind people is that they have internal stats that they can look at. Like, you pull up the Ubisoft like Uplay launcher and it says number of killed enemies, number of this and that. Um, Modern design studios use crazy amounts of data that they collect from players, and they use that to not just design worlds but to figure out what quests people like and which ones they finish, which areas of the map they travel the most. Um, and that data can be extremely useful and powerful. Famously in like Breath of the Wild, where they actually have the trail where you can see everywhere you ran on the map. That's basically what they use, and then they figure out the spaces that you didn't run to, and they try to figure out why you didn't explore that area, and then they put something there to pull you in so that they spread you out through the map. Stuff like that. And that same data is, I'm sure, what they're using to try and figure out what to do with Assassin's Creed, with Far Cry, because I think you're right. Like, a lot of people probably popped in, tried a couple missions in co-op with Far Cry, but that's like, it was such a minor element of the game, at least in terms of how people prioritized it and felt about it. It barely made it into any big reviews for the game at launch.
Hmm.
Barely
Yeah.
anybody talked about it. And I would be shocked if they have over 1,000 people playing the co-op in Far Cry 6 on a regular basis, like over and even just a weekend. Um,
Yeah.
it's just not something players really want. I think hopefully what they're trying to do is look at examples like Bethesda, CD Projekt Red, Rockstar, and see that you can have single player games that make billions of dollars by themselves. You just have to have an amazing high quality experience that does what it does better than anybody else. You can't, like you're saying, you can't throw in co-op for a few missions. Then over here, we've got a crazy crafting system. Then over here, we've got like a weird time challenge thing. That isn't actually what people want. People want something that is memorable and unique. And my personal hope, fingers crossed, for what they do with like a Far Cry 7 is that they lean into what they did with Giancarlo Esposito. They bring in another phenomenal talent to perform as the villain, because Far Cry is so much about the villains at this point, and they focus on a really dark, gritty shooter, and it's open world and has exploration elements, but don't try to make it like this weird Wildlands mixed with Far Cry thing. Just make it a
Yeah.
dark, gritty narrative that compels people to finish it for that sake. And I think really all Ubisoft really needs to do is to keep working on quality over quantity, because when they do that, it turns out well for them, and the fan base gets won over. The fan base is more interested. I mean, just look at the reputation that Odyssey has now. Odyssey sort of has a second wind under its sails because people are going back to it and being like, this is actually really good. So many people said, don't play it because it's not Assassin's Creed, but it ended up being like a really solid title, and it's getting a second wind because of that. And that game, last thing I'll say, then I'll stop rambling. That game, Odyssey, was also freaking nominated for Game of the Year against like God of War and Red Dead Redemption 2. Like, if
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not a compliment to how good that game is as an
And I
open
think,
world
yeah.
game, like, that's amazing.
And I think that shows that their focused approach works, because that was really focused on being an open world RPG. And if they can do that with Red as well, that bodes well. And like I was just like with Far Cry kind of scared that they think, because what you say would be the perfect Far Cry game, but we of course have to keep in mind that they are looking at the engagement. Like the
Mm-hmm.
biggest metric they shared for Far Cry 6 was, oh, more hours spent than Far Cry 5. Yeah, for sure, it's a way bigger game, so
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense. But that's kind of what was like. They were not saying it sold more because it didn't. but people spend more time in the world, which was also very valuable. And I think even recently Andrew Wilson from the CEO of EA did like a presentation where he said like the more people spent in the game like immediately equals more dollars they're spending or yeah on like in-game items. So I'm just curious, like I think what they are doing with the expeditions, like going to different parts of the world, I really think that Far Cry 7 will not have one map. I think it would be cool to go to other places in one game as well. So not the Infinity style where it's still different games, but have like smaller maps, but then multiple you can go to. I'm just curious. I felt the multiplayer was super forced in because they thought they had metrics. Hey, if people play the game together, they're likely spending more time in the world. But yeah, I think we can both agree that while fun, while cool as an option, it's not really what Far Cry is about. Like if you think of Far Cry, you think of 3, you think of the amazing story with Voss and those characters and those moments. And we sure had that a bit later on, but they were few and far between after that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, audiences have a gut feeling with a lot of these games where they can just sense when something isn't a priority and when it's been tacked on, and it's got a weird funk to it. It's stinky. People are like, it just turns them off. They're like, I don't really like this. Man, I'm good. And it doesn't matter like how polished you make it, how flashy you make it. It just kind of turns people off. Like my wife is playing through Assassin's Creed Valhalla right now, and the weird like segments where you're transported to Asgard and you go through and you fight the Smurfs and you do all of that. Like she looked at me last night. She's like, what is happening? Like, what is going on? Like I was having
I like
fun.
those parts. I actually thought it was cool.
I'd be okay if that was like the big expansion. It's like, oh, we get to go to Asgard and we do that. But then you let the main game be its one thing, and it does London and castle raids really, really well because they end up being just copy and pasted by the end of the game. Yeah, and then you do the Asgardian stuff really, really well and focus on that. It's all just about intentionality and focus. And it really seems like this guy is describing a change in editorial approach, is how he puts it, where they are very intentionally trying to put out games that do like target one sub audience and target the crap out of them, make them very happy, even if other people have to wait for their game. And then when they get their game, they're happy. And then you move on to the next group. And you can do that sort of 2, 3, 4 year rolling live service thing with each one of those. But as long as you made that core group of people happy, they'll come back and keep playing the game.
And you can have them like live next to each other as well. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
That is very interesting as well, because right now it's like obvious, okay, Origins had to stop. While I would love to have like an extra expansion with Bayek, no, Odyssey was right around the corner. So they had to stop that because the marketing for the next game will keep on rolling. But now they're saying Codename Red, it's an open world RPG. Hexay, which will come after that, is a different type of game. So we will totally still have post-launch stuff for Codename Red even after the release of Hexay, which I think is also a very interesting new approach.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. And it's, the players have a lot of time on their hands, but when you win people over with the quality of the game, people are willing to juggle multiple games. Like I love Apex Legends. I love arenas specifically, so I'll play arenas. Does that mean I'm not playing anything else? Well, no. But when I'm bored on a Saturday and I just want something to scratch that itch, I'll pop into Apex Legends arenas and grind out some ranked, because it feels good and it's solid. But if like these games that really try to be live service, you end up burning out on, and you're just like, no, you're trying so hard to get me to love you. It's like the clingy high school girlfriend or boyfriend. Like you're just like, leave me alone. Stop. I need space. That's what these live service titles can turn into. So
I think that's a very interesting point that you're actually making about like modes. Like you are an Apex Legends player, but an arena Apex Legends player. And for Assassin's Creed, we will at one point also be like, if hopefully Mirage does well. And I still think that it's interesting because it's of course made with the Valhalla tool. So there are now headlines, they're bringing back the Unity parkour. No, they're not. Like they're inspired by the Unity parkour, but
very different.
People are already people are already running with that. But like I hope that it does well, and that it like maybe gives Ubisoft Bordeaux, who's of course the lead the team, just the green light. You from now on are the old school Assassin's Creed studio. You go make those games while Quebec focuses on the RPGs and Montreal tries to innovate in the AC space. So then when you are like at a party, hey, you like Assassin's Creed games? Yeah, but I don't like Red, like I don't like the RPG. So you have like multiple. I mean, you already have them, but right now it's only the RPG people that are kind of happy with new content for Valhalla. But hopefully at one point you have multiple groups that all like Assassin's Creed for a different thing, kind of like Apex, where some like the Battle Royale and some like the Arena.
Yeah.
Which I think is a cool approach.
I totally agree. And I think when people ask what is the vision for Infinity, that's basically it. It's that they want to have a singular hub for Assassin's Creed with the lore and the art styles and everything that comes along with it. But underneath that umbrella are experiences, to use their terms, that cater to stealth-focused old school players, that cater to the new school RPG players, and a separate one like Hexe, which might be like horror focused or like a little darker and grittier. It's kind of hard to tell right now.
I think it will be like maybe like Elden Ring, like in a sense that it will just be less handholdy, like that they will really like scare the heck out of you with like
the Hexe out.
The Hexe out of you. Yeah. No, but that there will be no markers. You will just be like in a forest, go survive, and then it will be way harder. I would not be surprised if they, and also like going back to Valhalla after having the Hexe reveal, because it's of course the team behind Valhalla that's making Hexe. You already kind of see the sort of dark England atmosphere, right? They were already kind of experimenting with that, so it is a very logical step. While when I saw Hexe for the first time, I was like, okay, that's a cool direction, but yeah, you already kind of see the bones in Valhalla, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and I love, and then we can. I'll let you go to sleep because I know it's late there. But like, I do love that when they're developing these games over the course of years and years and years, there is a process where like the designers are experimenting, building quests and designing the world and doing all of this stuff to make the game ready for release. And as they're doing that, they get some ideas like, oh, this is kind of cool. Maybe we'll put that on a Post-it note. We'll save that for later. We'll set that over there, and maybe we'll come back to that. And it's the same thing with like Hexe, where they're just like experimenting with these different things, and they see the potential for it, whether it was intentional or accidental. And then, they come back. And if there's a good leadership team in place who can listen to those ideas, you can capture that little lightning in a like bottle, and you can take that and turn it into something great. And hopefully this new guy that's come in and is shaking things up and the editorial team at Ubisoft is going to do just that. Capture those interesting ideas, put them forefront, and give the design teams enough leeway to create focused experiences instead of everything having to be like the new GTA 5 but with swords,
Yeah. I think we always have to, and that's always when covering Ubisoft stuff, like we're only like listening to words, and we've been here a couple of times, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. So right now, like I also said it in a recent video, like with Skull and Bones, I see an old Ubisoft, Ubisoft out of touch. Like they are releasing that game, it really feels to be over with. They had like a deal with the Singapore government where they had to like release a new IP in the next few years, and that's why they got like a lot of subsidies. So yeah, I see that is like the old Ubisoft, and with this whole Assassin's Creed showcase, I see like, oh, they're learning. They're like this has been in the works from or with this new editorial management and with this new vision. So I mean, we still have to wait and see, and I'm mostly curious how this applies to Ghost Recon, for example, because that is really in the mud right now. Like they really did everything they could to ruin that series.
Yeah, so, it would be hard to ruin it more.
So they can only go up, but still, right? It will be interesting, and of course, like their free-to-play initiatives that they just come and go. Like how are they able to launch a game like Roller Champions and have no one talk about it? Like that's kind of hard to imagine when like stuff like EA had one of those sports games as well. I can't remember the name, but the more people talked about that, which is kind of...
Was it like the dodgeball one? Was that
yeah,
the dodgeball thing they did. Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy. So we will have to wait and see overall. Like I think Mirage will also still, we haven't seen gameplay yet, so it's still like a wait and see approach. All we can do, I think, right now is say, hey, this is going in the right direction, but they still have to hit a lot of like marks and points to really see this come into fruition. I want to ask you one last thing though, because yeah, I have to sleep now. It's not that late actually here when we record this, but they also talked about Invictus, like the new Ubisoft mobile multiplayer Assassin's Creed, which again I think is also, next to the fact that they are making these games for the old school audience and the RPG audience, that they're also not like shoehorning in multiplayer, because that's when Infinity was like announced live service. Oh, it's probably gonna be online only, multiplayer only. No, they actually have a separate multiplayer team of veterans from Rainbow Six Siege and For Honor, seeing what a multiplayer Assassin's Creed could look like. Like, what is your ideal multiplayer game? Because that's also very interesting. They haven't really talked about it yet. It seems to include many characters like villains and some of the assassins, of course. So what do you think it can be? I'm just really curious to see what their next iteration of that will be.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things I weirdly had a great time with was the Assassin's Creed Unity multiplayer, and it was relatively recently. Like, you can still do it pretty easily. It's a little, I mean, it's Unity, of course it's glitchy, but it actually felt surprisingly fluid to go on stealth assassination missions with a friend. And like, France was a great place to set something like that, because the missions were like, oh, there's a gigantic palace and you can both start on opposite sides of it and you work through, and in voice chat you can be like, hey, there's the guy on the balcony, can you take him out for me? And then he's like, yeah, but I need you to distract this guy. And so you go and you do that, and it actually feels really, really good. It's almost like a cooperative hitman. And in that capacity, I think it could be amazing. I don't want like a co-op open world Valhalla type of game. I just don't think that we need something like that, and I don't think it would be that compelling. But I think if they made like a pretty difficult Hitman style with tons of replayability, careful level design, that type of thing, but with co-op where you can complete these missions and challenges together, that to me would be really, really interesting and really compelling. And I think it would potentially even be easier to develop, and you could do it with a smaller team than trying to do like an open world co-op game, because you would just have to like I said, like one palace, and that's where you do it. Like, you don't need to have a world.
Kind of like the Hitman levels that they're doing as well. And I think overall, I think a lot of people can learn from how Hitman does live service as well, with like having another elusive target. So basically another target in the same map, but in a different location. So you have to like completely change your strategy. Yeah. Which kind of cool. And yeah, that could fit very well. I think that's a very interesting choice. And it is kind of like the terrorist hunt mode from Rainbow Six Vegas as well. In a way, like, but we don't really see that often anymore. I'm curious though, like, I don't know if PvP is the way to go, but yeah, co-op, like, I would not mind. Like, I do think that with the build capabilities of an Odyssey and having, I think you can really go that RPG route. But yeah, maybe you're like, it's not too different from other live service RPGs out there. So yeah, I do get that. But,
we'll see. I mean,
it's very interesting.
I think the way I would describe my overarching feelings after all of this, as I have for so long, to everyone out there, is extremely cautious optimism. I hope that this turns into something good. I hope that this editorial change leads to games that are really good at what they do and don't try to be the jack of all trades. But, you know, actions speak louder than words. Anybody can say anything in an interview. You know, he could have said in this, oh, no, the next Assassin's Creed is going to be clearly way better than Red Dead Redemption 2 and, you know, anything that Rockstar's ever done. And, you know, he could say that very easily and it wouldn't mean anything. We got to see it. We got to see it. And I hope that we see more of like Mirage actual gameplay and stuff soon. I hope we get to see what these games actually can do and what the design choices are. But until then, we just have to wait. But if I'm just going off of this, I'd say I'm excited about this news. I think that this is good news.
Yeah, it's like a different Ubisoft. I think that's the most interesting thing about it. Where first it was like everything has to be an RPG, everything has to be online, and now they're like, no, single player has a place as well. I also think it's very interesting that even if Infinity fails or whatever, like we will still have an open world RPG in Japan that will likely be of the same quality as Odyssey.
Mm.
So if everything goes wrong, there will still be like a game you can buy, which is basically as we have it now. Like I think Infinity is really an added bonus. Could be really cool. Could be different. Only the modern day being separate, of course, is a big change if you're into that
Mm-hmm.
sort of stuff. But yeah, I like them also trying to reinvent it with Hexay. I mean, it's time like for the next step from like we saw from Syndicate to Origins.
Yeah.
So
And I hope, we don't know all of the behind the scenes shakeups that's going on, people that have been pushed out and reassigned and fired and
mhm.
rehired. Like, who knows what's going on behind the scenes completely. But like you said, this is a different Ubisoft than we've seen for the last probably 5-6 years. And I think most of us would agree what they've been doing isn't working for most people. And so the fact that they're going in a different direction, at the very least, is a start and is something that I think bodes potentially very, very well. So,
Yeah, like
until
you
then.
also said, they can only go up from here. So
Yeah, they're kind of
they
down
can't do
there.
much more wrong.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, thank you, Joe Raptor, for chatting. I have one last question for you
Sure.
that I've always wanted to ask you because it drives me.
Okay.
It's captivated me.
Oh
Where
no.
did you get the name Joe Raptor?
So my real name is Jordan,
Okay,
and I just really like dinosaurs.
you
Like
just like
it's as
raptors.
simple as it's as simple as that. And of course, also when like pro tip when picking a name for like a channel, make sure that it's not something else. So I could like immediately go to Twitter at Joraptor like it wasn't taken already. So that's also like part of it.
Mm,
Yeah, that I have it like across every platform. Although right now, when there's like a brand new platform coming up, I try to do Joe Raptor and it's already
it's already
taken.
taken. Yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of sucks. But I still got it for TikTok, for example,
Oh wow.
which I'm
Yeah. There you
happy
go.
about. Yeah,
Yeah. There
so
you go. They got. Have you seen that Twitter account that's like X movie but with raptors? Have you ever seen that?
no.
No, dude, you got to look it up. Everybody out there, you got to look it up. It's like some VFX guys, and they just take famous movie scenes or scenes from like the Lord of the Rings like TV show, and then they just CGI a raptor head onto the main character's head. So like they have a scene from
Everything is
like
better.
yeah, it's just it works really really well. Every time
Yeah.
I see it, I'm like, I wonder if Joe Raptor like does that. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice man.
Recommend it.
Thanks.
Thanks for chatting. Thanks for hanging. We'll do it again. Everybody down in the comment section below, make sure you say how much you love Joe Raptor and go over, throw him a sub. Do you have anything, like where can people find you?
Yeah, like I said, across everything Joe Raptor, so it's pretty easy. Yeah, we're trying to do some more shorts and stuff as well. So that's kind of I think a very cool opportunity for creators to have, because we are of course from the long form content takes a lot of time to make. On TikTok, you can have like a video of 8 seconds do as well or even
Yeah,
better than
it's
like
like
your
kind
regular.
of frustrating. It's like
Yeah.
it's like you work your ass off. Like I do these big critiques that are hours and hours long,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it takes me months and months to make them, and I put them out, and like they do pretty well. Like the Elden Ring one I did that's like 3 hours long is I think it did like a third of a million views, and it did pretty well. But then like I throw something together like that Ubisoft showcase. I filmed that reaction on my S22 Ultra, like propped up on the wall, and that video does like 150,000, and it took
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
15 minutes. So it's always a little frustrating, but it's
Yeah,
good.
but we
It's
have
good.
to be happy with people that want to sit through long form content, because that's, and maybe old man speaking here, but I'm not sure about those kids anymore. Like they are gonna scroll through like, and having like people or having like a huge audience on TikTok try and have them watch YouTube content, that's I think pretty hard. So I think the other way
Mhm.
around is
Yeah,
in the end better.
yeah,
So yeah, that would be it. Yeah, follow me everywhere you want, and yeah,
yeah.
let's follow the Ubisoft news and see where it goes and critique them when needed, and be talk about them like being cautiously optimistic when when they're
Yeah.
making the right moves.
criticize them when they screw up and praise and laud them when they do something good. You know, no special treatment here. But thank you, Joe Raptor. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Much love.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you in the next one. We'll do it again.
Goodbye.